There was a farmer who had 3 sons, and they leased a piece of land from a noble who was the owner. They ran a herd of goats, and the 3 sons were the shepherds that took care of the herd. Now they noticed amongst themselves that there was one particular goat who gave milk that was thicker, sweeter, and richer than all the others. So it was decided that the eldest brother would follow that goat to see where it was grazing. So the next day, the eldest brother followed the goat, and to his very great surprise, it entered a cave. Now, this brother thought that he knew every piece of this land. He'd never seen this cave before. But when he entered the cave, he could hear the faint sound of the goat's bell in the distance, but he noticed that there was a glint on the ground ahead of him after his eyes had become accustomed to the dark. And when he looked more closely, he found that it was gold and jewels spread on the floor of the cave. Now, of course, he quickly went to those riches and tried to stuff them in his pockets. But as soon as he touched them, they disappeared along with the cave itself, and he found himself back in the field. He hastened to go home to tell his father and his brothers what had happened, and it was decided that the second brother would go to the cave and also follow the goat. Now, when the second brother entered the cave, he noted the glint of the gold, but was very careful to keep his eyes averted from it so that he wouldn't be seduced by it. But as he entered the cave further, he came to another little cabin. And in that cabin, as his eyes grew accustomed to the darkness, he noticed a figure lying on the floor. But that figure arose, and it was a naked woman, more beautiful than he'd ever seen in his life, looking at him lustfully. And so the desire rose in him, and he went to embrace her. As he put his arms around her, she disappeared, as did the cave around him. He went back, and he told his father and his brothers what had happened. And it was decided that the third brother would go to try to follow the goat. And the next day, the youngest brother went and indeed followed the goat into the cave. He was very careful to pass through the cabin where the glint of gold and gems lay, and then he averted his eyes when he passed through the cabin where the naked woman lay. But then he came into a third cabin, and then when his eyes became accustomed to the dimness, he noticed that there was a man standing at what was a lectern, a pulpit, with an ancient book laid out on the pulpit, studying. So the youngest brother asked the man, "Who are you?" And the man answered, "Oh, I came here to find a quiet place of study. And here I study the ancient books, but I've come across a passage that is very difficult to understand. Perhaps you can assist me." Now it so happened that the youngest brother, from an earliest age, had been interested in the ancient teachings, and he'd studied the books that had come into his possession. So when he looked over the shoulder of the man studying at the lectern, he realized that the passage that was under contention was a very, very difficult one, and it could take weeks, months, even years to try to come to some consensus about what the deep meaning of this passage was. And the youngest brother could hear the sound of the goat's bell in the distance. And taking his leave of the man at the pulpit, he followed the goat's bell out of the cave when he came into a wonderful garden. There he could see that the grass was lush and green and juicy. There was an abundance of fruit on the trees such as he'd never seen. And he realized, this was where the goat was grazing, and this was why its milk was so rich and sweet. He decided that he would like to go back through the cave to bring his family to this place so they could all live in the richness of these pastures in this land. When he turned to find the mouth of the cave, it was not to be found. The young man with the goat made a new life for himself in this place, and he prospers there still. What for you is the deep meaning of this story?
It's not going.
Strangely, over these last days, those who have come to visit and those who have been encountered somehow have brought up the awareness of their aloneness. How does this story rest with us? Recognizing that we cannot go back.
Because even though at the end of it he's alone, he still has everything.
Yes.
It's more than still. He has everything before he didn't have.
So when do we get our go?
As soon maybe as we are ready to accept to let go of the apparent everything.
So the story has deep meaning.